And now for the thrilling conclusion. Yeah, so Jeskai tokens, not exactly the same as it ever was. Obviously, Jace, Prince Prodigy, slash the Telepath Duder. What's his backside called? Telepath Unbound. Obviously, Jace, a very powerful magic card, but more often than not, you're going to win games on the back of Stoke the Flames plus Hordling Outburst or Jeskai Ascendancy plus any of your token generators. Now, as you saw in those games, though, Jace was a huge deal, both in looting to help us find more removal spells, more interaction, more lands even, but also his flip side, locking down creatures was good against the mono black humans deck, and even just like flashing back treasure cruises over and over just gave us so much card advantage against these opponents that had these really slow and grindy decks. Seeker felt pretty solid. I think it's probably better in this deck than Soulfire Grandmaster since it can get much bigger much more quickly. And honestly, I haven't been that impressed with Soulfire Grandmaster in quite some time. So Seeker, I think, gets the nod for this. Going forward, the Oshai's commands, I think, are a little too cute. I really like Jace and Seeker as 2-drops in the deck, but I think Oshai's command puts a little too much stress on trying to leave random stuff in the graveyard for treasure cruise, whereas before, you could just eat your whole graveyard and not have to worry about anything, but you have all these cards in your deck that don't really work that well with treasure cruise, so I would probably cut Oshai's command from this main deck, and in place of it, play Fiery Impulse, I believe. Just 2 copies of that. Like, there's so many decks in Standard right now that have a bunch of small creatures, and Fire Impulse is probably as good, if not better, than Wild Slash. So I think it might take some time for it to catch on, but since, Fire Impulse can't hit your opponent, but being able to trigger Ascendancy for cheap or just kill your opponent's creature for 1 mana, I think is huge. And Standard feels like it's moving to a point where it's either a bunch of mana dorks or just a bunch of small creatures in general. The red decks, I think, could give this archetype a problem. The mono black humans deck was also felt problematic in game 1, and so having access to a couple more 1 mana removal spells could be good in that matchup as well. Probably not something you're worried about, but the theme remains the same. Your opponents play small, cheap creatures. You need to be able to kill them. If you don't, you're going to get run over pretty quickly. I only drew the Secure the Waste 1 time. I only drew it 1 time where I could cast it and actually make guys. So I didn't really get to see if that card was that great in this particular version. I would lean towards yes because of how powerful the card can be, and it's just a one of. Sometimes it's going to be one of the only cards that can save you. Whenever you're casting it for 4 or more, it just feels like a huge blowout, especially if you have Jeskai Ascendancy in play. The fact that they're not red means that they're going to be worse with Stoke the Flames than Hordling Outburst, but I think that's just kind of the way it's going to be. The Raise the Alarms, I think, could just be better served as more copies of Dragon Fodder. I felt like the instant speed on them wasn't necessary, and there were a couple games where having Raise the Alarm instead of Dragon Fodder meant that I was taking damage from my Pain Lands, and that's a huge deal against the aggressive matchups, so keep that in mind when you're, if you want to change stuff in the deck, just keep that in mind that Dragon Fodder is really good with Stoke the Flames. Not that many people play Bile Blight. You're not playing Goblin Rabble Master, so your goblins aren't forced to attack. And so Dragon Fodder in all those scenarios is going to be better than Raise the Alarm most of the time. The instant speed of Raise the Alarm is cute against decks with a lot of 1 toughness creatures because you can surprise drop it in, eat a guy, maybe even eat 2 guys, but the fact that they make white creatures instead of red creatures makes it much worse when you're trying to Stoke the Flames people. The sideboard felt decent, not exactly as good as most of the Jeskai Ascendancy sideboards I've had. The Sphinx Tutelage could be good against control decks. We didn't get to play against a real control deck. I did bring it in against the really slow 4 or 5 color deck, or I guess it was just 4 colors. We only saw 4 colors. But the Sphinx's Tutelage, they could be great. They could be mediocre, but my gut tells me they're going to be insane against control decks, and you're going to want them because they're going to have so many sweeper effects that it's going to be so hard to kill them with tokens. So Sphinx's tutelage definitely gets a recommendation in my book. The 6 counter spells, the 4 disdainful stroke, 2 negate. That's probably fine. I might recommend a gainsay over one of the negates, so you have 5 cards that can counter an opposing Ojutai, since the Esper Dragons decks that they haven't really been cropping up too much lately, but I think they're going to make a comeback at the Pro Tour, and if they do, then having 5 ways to counter Ojutai I think is huge. Negate's obviously good, but gainsay counters dragons, so keep that in mind. I might want to trim a little bit on some of the well, no, the more I think about it, I think some number of Valor Stance or Roast should be in the main deck. Lightning Strike is okay, right? Like, it kills most creatures that cost you know, very small amounts of mana, but without something like Abzan aggro in the metagame right now, due to Languish being all over the place, I think it's important to reassess your removal suite and make sure that you have the right removal suite for the right decks. And Roast and Valor Stance both feel like they're pretty good right now, since so many people are playing Siege Rhinos or just 5 toughness creatures that can survive Languish. They're also really good against the Green Devotion decks that are just running rampant in Standard right now. So anyway, guys, that is the Jeskai Tokens Spotlight from the Standard Open in Chicago. If you haven't already, make sure to watch the deck tech up top with, I believe it was Nick Miller. And yeah, you might learn a little more about the deck from the man himself as opposed to me. Hopefully these matches gave you a little bit of insight into Jace of Rin's Prodigy and how it's going to affect Standard. The card is phenomenally good. If you haven't bought them yet already, highly recommend doing so. It's going to be good in a bunch of different archetypes, and it's going to be in Standard for a long time. So anyway, guys, that's all for me. I'm Todd Anderson for Star City Games. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.